Well, hello everyone. This is A.T.I Draws. I'm Joshua Haddad, and I would like to thank you guys for taking time out your day to come and watch my video. I hope you guys are doing excellent on your art, and I hope you guys are making really great progress with your arts, and I hope your day is going very good so far. Here today, I'd like to present to you a artwork I've been working on for quite a bit now. It's my first time ever drawing digitally, so I'd just like to present my artwork. This is Tahira and Neoma. On this slideshow, you can see the two different characters. Tahira is the one that is in all mainly white, of a white contrast here. Neoma is the one in a mainly black contrast here. These two were devised up when I came up with the idea that I wanted characters with a contrasting color scheme. And through that, I was like, okay, I'm going to create these two assassin sisters. Now, with this idea, I went and I thought about what I wanted, and I came up with Middle Eastern Kunoichi sisters. So that was my idea. Just twin sisters that were Middle Eastern and were assassins. So that was my goal. Using this, I used a bit of reference of belly dancers for the little dress skirt thing on the bottom. A little skirt with leggings and stuff on the legs. And for the upper half, I decided to do a little kunoichi styled crop top for the upper part of the body. I decided to make it more tight, as majority of the time, more tighter, looser clothing does not get as caught. I was thinking more so the compression style of clothing, and that led to, well, the leggings being here and the clothes being skin tight for majority of the whole thing, and the only part that's loose and dangly is the belly dancer skirt part. Now I'd like to go and break down my art, and I'll let you know how I came to each and every single point. So for starters, let's deselect all the viewpoints on the layers, and let's just start up with layer 1, my sketch. As you can see in my sketch, my characters are more spaced out and it's a bit more messy. You see a lot of lines that were cut out in the end of my end illustration, and a lot of these are not as clean, and some of the stuff you see at the start is cut out. When creating this sketch, it took me a very, very long time to decide on what I wanted to do, and I made so much changes to the actual artwork itself. I just decided to settle on what I had because it was going to take way too long, especially since I was learning Clip Studio. I spent an absurd amount of time going on a shopping spree inside of Clip Studio, buying all these brushes that I don't really use. I only use 4 to 5 brushes max, and those are universally known brushes. Like, you know, you have to have your eraser, you have to have your sketch, you have to have your soft air brush, and you just have to have, like, just, you know, your bucket fill. Like, those little things, like, those are really what I use. I don't really use anything else. I didn't really know that because I got in here and I was picky because I didn't. With traditional, it was a little awkward for me going into digital. It was definitely very weird. I'll let you know. Yes, the stylus on the laptop or iPad or PC, whatever you use to draw digitally. For me, I use more so a 2-in-1, but it does not feel the same. My traditional artist out there does not feel the same, but in turn, your artwork gets much more of a brighter, more contrasting view to it, and I highly recommend trying digital out. But now let's head back to the actual artwork in itself. This piece took an absurd amount of time for the sketch. I did not like how much time it took, so I decided to settle on this, and I was going to adjust things later. My thought process going into this sketch was to make Tahira, the one on the left here, to be much more happy, more excited, more carefree, much more presentable in our appearance, and to be reaching in a forward perspective towards the flower I have here. The Neoma on the right hand side though, I wanted her to be much more fierce, much more cold with her appearance and look. So due to that, I made her hair much more wild, much more looser. I made her turn away from the camera, and I made her appear to be walking away. That was the way I devised this, and that's how I went about doing that. Now if I deselect my sketch layer and I go to my line art layer, as you can see, the characters are moved closer together. I did do that later on after the line art layer when I went on to about layer 7 where I started finalizing everything. I adjusted things before I added all the backgrounds and stuff in. That wasn't that hard to do. I was able to just clump everything together. It wasn't that bad. But as we can see, I cleaned up the lines for the line art. I made things much more presentable, more, well, just cleaner, nicer, and I was able to add my line weight and just make things look a lot more better. And it definitely set a lot of set time and just a perfect, easy to use sketch line art for me to add my flats, which I'll show you now. My flats, that's where I add the colors in. And I decided that I was going to make Tahira the one in white and Neoma the one in black. I thought that would probably be the best contrast, as black is often used with nighttime and using more of a colder scenario, as when you see more anime characters, you're doing glares or anything, usually there is a shadow or undertone depicting their glare. So I thought Neoma would probably be a lot better with the more black contrasting color. For white is often much more of a brighter color, so I wanted to use that with Tahira, which has a very, very bright, easygoing, and playful vibe. Now I did add highlights on the hair and blush on Tahira. I added some stuff onto the eyes as well. This is where I went in and I did my colors going from white to black at the end of the strips of the hair, as you see here, and even in the back of the hair. I made sure not to miss that. For Neoma though, I wish I made a really big change. Looking at this with the soft airbrush tool that we have in Clip Studio, I noticed that it probably would have been better if I made the end tips of the hair here turn white instead of trying to make the bottom half turn white. Because her hair is more wild and her hair is more looser and they're not really maintained, it would have made sense for the end of it to appear to be that way. But that's what I did. Not the worst thing in the world, but it could have been better. Now we went on to my light shading layer, where I went and I did some testing out with my shading, put some stuff together. I made sure that I added some major shades here, like the hair strands coming over the face, the area on the neck that's getting covered by the veil, the jaw, the area under the belly that's being covered here by the chest, and just the underneath of the thighs are being obviously covered by the legs themselves and by the skirt that's coming over. Also added on Neoma, the little shadows that's coming from the skirt that's dangling over the legs, and her hair that's covering over her arms. And that was the shading I added just to test out some shading. I then went on to test out some highlights, in which I added some highlights on the golden gauntlets here. I added some highlights on the fingernails here. I added some highlights on the gauntlets over here, some on the eyes, some on the jewel that's on the headband, some that's on, you see, I did add some bit more shading here, but that's because I tend to work as I go. And if I add a new layer, it's for highlights, but I notice I can put shading there, I would tend to forget to go back to a layer, and I would add the shades on the highlight layer. But it didn't turn out bad, and it was definitely a good improvement to add. I had to add some more shading on the top of the head, and I added some highlights onto the circular ring spike hairband I created. I created that because I thought it would be cool to think of like a shuriken as your hairband. Now looking at it, it doesn't look too much like a shuriken, but it gets the point across. It does look nice, and it does bring a good aesthetic towards the character design, and I think it played definitely a big essential role going into this. Now the next final step is I went and I added all the extra stuff like the background, and though I used several layers and combined them to one, you can obviously see I added a lot more shading highlights on the top of Neoma's hair. I added more shading going down on the dresses. I added more highlights going in. I added more details to the hand, for example. I added shading on the skirt here. I added more detail, just making sure that the lighting, the shading, everything were more matched up. I made the face try to look more 3D with the appearance, and I tried my best to make it much more presentable. Though I didn't really use digital before, I was able to understand quite a bit of things, and it was so much more easier. Next time I'm doing this, I'm definitely doing the background along with the sketch, because once I had the background down, the lighting, the shading was so much more easier to do. For those guys who are drawing, especially if you're going from traditional to digital and you're trying to draw a character or drawing some things, definitely keep the background drawing with the sketch. It'll make things a lot more easier. Now, if you are really good at understanding your shading and your highlights, by all means go ahead. But I personally recommend, from my personal experience, to do the background along with your character sketch, as it makes things much more easier in depicting where your lights and your shadows will be. Now, I added another layer before merging it with the layer 7. I added it and I did a light outline around the character's face and torso. I did a bit more on Neoma, but for Tahira I just did her face and just upper parts of her torso. I then took the lasso tool and I expanded it, and I did the same with Neoma. And I took another page where I bucket filled these two sides in. I went back and I did the soft airbrush. I went through and I went and did a lot of contrast right here just to add some more detail. After that, I merged those two layers together. Then I decided to add some contrasting shading because it's on a darker layer. I was like, I want to do something interesting where I make her color become the color of the shade on the darker side of the panel. So because of that, I then took white and I made it a shade for her, and I also have her background coming back here. Now for Neoma, I did something similar where I did the same outline for her. Now you see more of her body, but I still did the same with the soft airbrush, making sure I covered the parts of the hair and keeping it roughly the same colors I did before, trying to balance things out. After that, I made sure I went back through, did all my shading, did all my highlights. I went through, made sure all the details were on the hands here, around the arms, on the shoulders. The shading was more in tune. I went and put more details in on this hand here. And I just made sure that a lot of details that should have been there are there. I completely missed a flower, but regardless, I think in the end, this is my artwork. This is what I did. That was my thought process going into doing this artwork. That was my process doing the artwork. And that was my experience with drawing Tahira and Neoma. If I had to go back, I would change a few things like I mentioned before. I would definitely change the highlights on the hair here for Neoma. I definitely would have done the highlights on the flowers, shadings and stuff. And I probably would have went back through and did a bit more tweaking on how I did the shading, the highlights, and how I structured a character a bit more. But other than that, I don't think my drawing was bad, nor do I think for somebody who just transitioned over to digital, doesn't know how it worked, didn't know what to do, and just came in, drew something, and tried his best. I think that that was definitely a good improvement for me, and definitely something I enjoy to do. You're definitely going to see a lot more from me, and as I improve, you guys will see that. And I'm glad that you guys joined me for another wonderful video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please make sure to like and to subscribe. I deeply appreciate that, and I hope you guys continue drawing. Hope you guys really enjoyed today's video, and I hope that you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, and enjoy the wonderful artwork I made. See you guys.